Oh, greetings, my dear wizards, witches, muggles, and squibs. And here I am, today a bit more rushed and excited than usual. For today I must make my way to Hogwarts, where the annual celebration in memory of the late Albus Dumbledore will take place. No, don't worry, I've just overdone it on the peppermint lately. But enough of that. As old Dumbledore would want, in his honor, the time has come to tell you his story in this special extended version of the Spellbook Chronicles. So a longer, more detailed and in-depth episode. My dear friends, today we'll dive into the life of one of the most enigmatic and crucial figures in magical history. A man whose life is full of genius and tragedy. From his difficult childhood to his brilliant student career, right up to the decisive duel with Grindelwald and the encounter with Tom Marvolo Riddle. So, are you ready?
The year was 1993. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, ancient and venerable, had witnessed centuries of wonder and peril. Yet even its solid walls seemed to shudder under the weight of a dark resurgence. Students lay petrified. Rumors of monsters whispered through the corridors, and fear clung to every shadowed corner. The castle was under siege by a cunning and unseen malevolence that slithered through the heart of the school itself. The heir of Slytherin had returned. Albus Dumbledore, the wise and ever-watchful headmaster, had long suspected that Lord Voldemort, or simply Tom Riddle, as he preferred to call him, was far from gone. Despite the Ministry and the wizarding world's unwavering conviction of his final death, a silent unease had lingered in Dumbledore's mind. And now, with the Chamber of Secrets reopened, that unease had hardened into certainty.
You'll be next, Mom.
Voldemort's reach extended beyond mere corporeal existence. Over the decades, Dumbledore had heard whispers, fragments of rumor, half-truths about a magic so ancient, so dark, it defied comprehension. Forbidden experiments, rituals devised by Herpo the Foul in the darkest recesses of ancient Greece to cleave a soul and bind it to objects, transcending the very limits of life itself, hinted at a path to immortality, perhaps the only one beyond the Philosopher's Stone. Yet until now, Dumbledore had possessed nothing more than conjecture. But when the young Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the one who had already escaped Voldemort not once but twice, returned to his office clutching a peculiar diary, the headmaster's eyes betrayed the faintest spark of recognition. The diary was no ordinary artifact. It was a vessel of life, yet not of its own making. The very essence of Tom Riddle had permeated those pages. Now, only dead pages. Yet Dumbledore could sense it. An echo, a fragment, a soul preserved beyond the boundaries of mortal time. In a distorted, weak, and twisted form, certainly. Dumbledore's heart clenched at the realization. Yet Voldemort, through that diary, had been alive enough to claim new victims and plunge Hogwarts once more into the deepest darkness.
Voldemort.
The whispers of Horcruxes, once a shadow at the edge of his mind, now took a shape that was undeniable. And yet the diary's careless exposure raised a chilling question. Why had Voldemort entrusted a fragment of his own soul to chance? Such a reckless display was unthinkable for a mind so meticulous, so obsessive in its pursuit of immortality, like that of Tom Riddle. And so it was that Dumbledore, in the heart of that early summer night, understood. Tom's ambition had never been confined to a single vessel. The diary was but one of many fragments, each likely well hidden, each guarded by magic so dark it was scarcely imaginable. The old wizard knew well that, from that moment, his knowledge and his wand would be at the service of a single purpose. The search for the Horcruxes would demand intellect, courage, and a confrontation with evil that bordered on the divine.
Your word, Harry.
A journey that perhaps for one last time would test him.
Yes, sir.
A search that could cost him his life. Yet life itself, in the end, would be a mere price, compared to the awareness that his contribution had brought not to a better world, but to a calmer place. A place, simply, where one could be oneself, each with their own qualities, their whims, their deeds, and their flaws. A world for which, according to Albus, it would always be worth fighting. A world in which one could look upon one's own life, and despite rash choices, despite irreparable mistakes, somehow know that one had done their utmost to make amends. This, my dear viewers, is the story of the most powerful wizard history has ever known. The story of the one who defeated Gellert Grindelwald. The story of Albus Dumbledore. At the end of the 19th century, the wizarding world stood at a crossroads. Throughout Europe, old Muggle regimes were falling one after another. In England, the Industrial Revolution had transformed cities, railways spanned continents, and scientific progress seemed to edge Muggles closer to discoveries that deeply unsettled the wizarding community. The Ministry of Magic watched with growing concern as their technologies advanced, fearing these tools might one day expose the existence of magic. It was in this tumultuous historical context that during the warm and tranquil days of August 1881, a child was born, one who would be remembered as the greatest and most powerful wizard the world had ever known. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. The son of Kendra, a Muggle-born witch, and Percival, a pure-blood wizard and a prominent figure in the noble Dumbledore family, whose crest features a phoenix. According to an ancient legend, this magical creature shares a unique bond with the family. A phoenix would come to the aid of any Dumbledore in desperate need. From his earliest years, young Albus displayed an exceptional talent for magic, particularly in his ability to understand it at its very core. He questioned even those things that others deemed trivial or self-evident. His curiosity seemed an inexhaustible well, a trait that would, over the years, evolve into an insatiable and at times obsessive thirst for knowledge. His attitude and thinking were exceptionally mature for a child, making him an immediate and protective figure, particularly towards his younger brother, Aberforth, but most of all towards his younger sister, Ariana. The Dumbledore family, during those years, lived a happy life in Mold on the Wold, a village that, like many others in England, such as Godric's Hollow, Tinworth, Upper Flagley, and Ottery St. Catchpole, became a place where witches and wizards settled in numbers after the International Statute of Secrecy, relying on one another for mutual support while living alongside a Muggle population. The days passed carefree, but as we know, no idyll lasts forever. It was an ordinary day, that afternoon in 1891, when little Ariana, only 6 years old, was playing near the hedge in the backyard. Unexpectedly, the young girl began manifesting her magical powers without being able to control them, as is normal for a witch of her age. But something unexpected happened. 3 Muggle boys, hidden nearby, had been secretly watching Ariana and witnessing her magical abilities. They demanded that she reveal the secret behind her magic, insisting she demonstrate the power they had just seen. However, Ariana, due to her very young age and magical immaturity, was unable to fulfill the Muggles' request. Perceiving this as a refusal, the boys used it as an excuse to channel their instinctive fear and misunderstanding of magic into a brutal act of aggression. This dramatic episode, in addition to leaving an indelible mark on Ariana's psyche and compromising the rest of her life, also tore a deep wound in the Dumbledore family, especially in her brother Albus. A wound that would never fully heal and would irreversibly shape his worldview and future ambitions as a young wizard. As a result of the attack by the Muggles, Ariana began to withdraw into herself, speaking less and less each day. Her once sunny and playful demeanor was replaced by a shadow fueled by terror. The trauma of what had happened was so overwhelming that the young girl developed an uncontrollable anxiety about her magical nature, which, little by little, began to fade, suppressed by her fear. Many scholars of magic agree in theorizing that what was slowly developing within Ariana Dumbledore was none other than an obscurus, a dark and parasitic force that emerges when a wizard child consciously suppresses their magical abilities or is forced to do so due to physical or psychological abuse. This energy can manifest as a separate entity, erupting in violent and destructive fury. For her father Percival, seeing the condition to which the three muggles had reduced his daughter was something that could not be ignored. Aware that the magical law enforcement would never intervene in such an insignificant case, the wizard arrived at the only possible solution. He would take justice into his own hands. It was an evening like any other when Percival found the three boys and attacked them with fierce fury. What those monsters had put his little girl through had to be avenged at any cost.
What do you want?
Although Percival spared the lives of the muggles, it is likely that he inflicted unbearable pain using the Cruciatus curse. The gravity of his actions was impossible to ignore, and it wasn't long before the sentence for his immediate arrest was issued, swift and unyielding. When asked, the wizard never revealed to the authorities the true reason for his attack. Had the truth come to light, he believed, little Ariana would surely have been taken from her family and placed under strict observation at St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries for the rest of her life, effectively locking her away permanently as a danger to the international statute of wizarding secrecy. And this, he thought,
Dad,
could never
where are
happen.
they taking
His
you?
daughter deserved to be kept safe, yes, but also loved and protected by her family. So, Percival Dumbledore was arrested and imprisoned in Azkaban, where he would remain until the end of his days. As a result of Percival's imprisonment, unpleasant rumors began to spread about the Dumbledore family in the village. The idea took hold that the attack on the three boys had been driven by a pure-blood ideology, fiercely anti-Muggle. A notion that was rather absurd, considering that Percival's wife, Kendra, was a Muggle-born witch. The woman, in order to preserve the integrity of the Dumbledore family, and above all, to protect her children,
Come on.
wisely decided to leave Mold on the Wold behind
We need to leave.
and settle in the village of Godric's Hollow. Despite the move, Ariana's condition worsened with each passing day. She began experiencing sudden, uncontrollable fits of rage, unleashing her repressed magical power with devastating force. Her brother Aberforth was the only one capable of calming her,
Ariana?
even more so than Kendra,
It's
who had
okay.
grown increasingly cold and withdrawn. She turned away every neighbor who came to welcome the family to Godric's Hollow,
Please.
showing no exception,
Go away.
even for Bathilda Bagshot, a promising magical historian who would later gain fame across the wizarding world for her book A History of Magic.
Good morning,
When
Mr.
Bathilda
Dumbledore.
arrived at the Dumbledore's door with a tray of homemade cauldron cakes,
No, thank you.
Kendra slammed the door in her face without a second thought.
How rude.
While Kendra cared for Ariana, forbidding her from leaving the house, rumors began to spread through the village about the Dumbledore's squib daughter, allegedly kept hidden away in a locked cell. Albus and Aberforth stopped mentioning their sister entirely, learning to lie about her existence until the lie became the only truth anyone knew. Albus, now on the verge of his admission to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, showed little interest in Ariana, unlike Aberforth, who remained deeply attached to her. Instead, Albus spent countless hours poring over books and scrolls, absorbing all the knowledge he could about magic. His brilliance did not go unnoticed by Bathilda Bagshot, who, in the years to come, would follow his academic career with great fascination. The summer faded into autumn in the year 1892, marking the start of Albus Dumbledore's first term at Hogwarts, where he was sorted into Gryffindor House. Under the leadership of headmaster Phineas Nigellus Black, the school,
Well done.
like the wizarding world itself,
I suppose.
was recovering from turbulent times. Just 2 years earlier, in 1890, Professor Eleazar Fig, the esteemed magical theory instructor, had lost his life during a raid led by the rogue goblin Ranrock, who sought to seize a hidden repository of ancient magic buried within the castle for decades. With the aid of a fifth-year student, however, Hogwarts had narrowly averted disaster, putting an end to the Loyalist Goblin Rebellion once and for all. On his very first day at Hogwarts, Albus formed an unlikely friendship with Elphias Doge, a boy still bearing the marks of a recent bout with dragonpox, his skin tinged green and pockmarked, a condition that left him isolated and avoided by most. But Albus, with a rare blend of empathy and insight,
What's your name?
saw past the surface.
Alphias.
Where others turned away, he extended a hand, drawn to the kindness and depth of character beneath Alphias' outward affliction. A boy who in time would become one of his most trusted friends. At Hogwarts, Albus discovered a sanctuary where he could indulge his insatiable thirst for knowledge. Nearly immediately, he became one of the most notable students at the school, not only for his unparalleled magical creativity and brilliance, but also due to the crime committed by his father. Rumors circulated among the student body, speculating about Albus's supposed disdain for Muggles. Some feared and criticized him for it, while others idolized him.
Look.
Yet Albus had little regard for gossip
It's
or the
Dumbledore.
opinions of others, choosing instead to focus on his own path. He threw himself wholeheartedly into his studies, even taking non-compulsory subjects like study of ancient runes. As the most exceptional student of his time, he was appointed a prefect in his 5th year, and later named head boy in his 7th. His extraordinary talent and relentless dedication to magical learning set him apart, paving the way for him to become one of the greatest wizards of his age. While much of his brilliance stemmed from his own efforts, he also benefited from the guidance of highly accomplished teachers who helped nurture his skills and unlock his full potential. His remarkable talents earned him trophies and honors, too numerous to count. Among these, he won the Barnabas Finkley Prize for exceptional spellcasting, served as the British youth representative to the Wiesengamot, and was widely regarded as perhaps the most brilliant student ever to grace Hogwarts. One whose future seemed poised to surpass even that of Merlin or the founders themselves. Thanks to his numerous achievements, Albus became remarkably well connected during his Hogwarts years, gaining the friendship and support of some of the most prominent scholars in the wizarding community. Among them was, of course, Bathilda Bagshot, but also Griselda Marchbanks, who examined him in his newts for charms and transfiguration, and later marveled that he did things with a wand she had never seen before. However, one figure stood above all as both a mentor and dear friend. The legendary alchemist Nicholas Flamel, creator of the infamous Philosopher's Stone and the Elixir of Life. Flamel passed down to Albus arts and secrets of magic so profound they defy the limits of ordinary understanding. During his years at Hogwarts, true to his Gryffindor spirit, Albus didn't shy away from dangerous adventures, often delving into the castle's secrets. Among these, he discovered the Spore Scrolls, a hidden collection left by headmistress Phillida Spore, detailing the creation of the Magical Enhancer, a rare fungus capable of amplifying magical abilities. Fearing how the wizarding world might exploit such knowledge, he decided its hiding place was far too vulnerable. Taking matters into his own hands, Albus stole the box containing the Spore Scrolls and concealed it deep within the Forbidden Forest.
Oh, my valiant adventurers, I bring you news that shines brighter than any Loomis. 3 enchanted tiers: Curious Wanderer, Enchanted Explorer, and Master Adventurer. The room of requirement? Nothing but a broom cupboard in comparison. With us, you'll gain early access to every episode, a secret Discord server to keep you ahead of everyone else, and that's not all. Priority replies to your comments, a direct channel to help you choose new content together, and even exclusive wallpapers taken from each episode. And it doesn't stop there. For the bravest among you, extra videos with my director's notes and reflections on the episodes already released. Because, let's be honest, you can never get enough of your dashing wizard adventurer Quentin Pentigran. Click join below for all the details. Joining the Spellbook family is a small gesture that supports our journey and allows us to bring content truly worthy of our audience. So thank you sincerely from the bottom of our hearts for being here. And you muggles listening in, I beg you tell me, what on Merlin's beard is a Discord server supposed to be?
Albus Dumbledore graduated in June 1899, and with the conclusion of his time at Hogwarts, he was forced to confront the harsh reality awaiting him. The fragile state of his family, and most of all, his sister, Ariana, whose struggles he had tried to ignore during the past 7 years. The girl, who had never been sent to Hogwarts, unlike her brother Aberforth, was by then widely considered a squib. Before settling permanently in Godric's Hollow, the young man planned to embark on the traditional Grand Tour with his friend Doge, a journey around the world undertaken by many graduates. For Albus, his studies had only scratched the surface of magical knowledge. There was an entire world waiting for him to explore. However, a tragic event prevented him from leaving. Ariana's suppressed magic, now at the age of 14, had become increasingly unstable. Though the exact circumstances were unclear, one morning, the intense emotions of the girl overwhelmed her, unleashing the fury and destruction of her own Obscurus. Over the years, it had fed on Ariana's pain, growing ever more lethal. Unfortunately, that day, her favorite brother Aberforth was not at home to calm her, and she accidentally caused an explosion that resulted in the death of their mother, Kendra. After what had happened, with no parents to guide them, Albus realized that it was now his responsibility to take care of his family, and most importantly, to care for Ariana. But despite his sense of moral duty, resentment began to take root in the young wizard. Albus returned to Godric's Hollow, feeling trapped and wasted. How could he improve and reach his full potential there, isolated in that country house? How could he ever become the great wizard everyone believed him to be, and fulfill his future? But fate had other plans, once again altering the course of events, when a young wizard of the same age as Albus arrived in Godric's Hollow from the distant north. The young man came to the village to live with his great-aunt, Bathilda Bagshot, in order to deepen his knowledge of the magical world. It was the summer of 1899 when Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald met for the first time, shaking hands.
Pleased to meet you, Albus.
After just a day of knowing each other, their bond quickly deepened into a close friendship. They spent hours together, exchanging ideas, discussing their dreams, and growing ever closer. They discovered they had much in common, sharing not only their ambitions, but a deep passion for magic. Albus had never encountered anyone as brilliant and charismatic as Gellert, someone so deeply knowledgeable about magic and so skilled in the use of its most complex spells. The young wizard shared with Albus the story of his expulsion from Durmstrang for immoral practices and experimentation with the dark arts.
And that's why
He explained how he had come to Godric's Hollow to further his knowledge of the magical world, especially the fabled artifacts known as the Deathly Hallows.
I'll find them.
According to legend, Godric's Hollow had once been the home of one of the three brothers from the tale, Ignotus Peverell, the possessor of the Cloak of Invisibility. For Grindelwald, finding the Deathly Hallows became an obsession, as he saw in them the power to enforce his vision and the courage to act for the greater good of the wizarding world and its preservation. Albus, too, quickly became captivated by Gellert's ideas of wizarding domination, partly viewing him as an unexpected opportunity to prove his own brilliance and escape the confines of his small, local life. But more than that, Albus found in Gellert's vision a solution and a kind of comfort to a problem that had ultimately led to the downfall of his own family. The existence of Muggles and their continued survival, left unchecked by the wizarding world, needed to change. The bureaucratic system orchestrated by the Ministry was flawed, old and weakened by its own laws, and it had to be overthrown. During the 2 months that Gellert stayed in Godric's Hollow, the bond between the young men deepened, growing into something more profound and intimate. They fell in love, trusting one another blindly, understanding and caring for each other in ways they had never experienced before. Albus, swept up in the fervor of their shared vision, pushed aside any lingering doubts about Gellert's darker tendencies. He allowed himself to believe that the revolution they were embarking on was truly for the greater good, a term he had coined himself, which would later become the motto of their ideology. He convinced himself that any harm along the way would be justified, that the sacrifices they made would be repaid 1,000-fold when their vision was finally realized. This is how one of the letters written by Albus during the summer of 1899 reads:
Gellert, your point about wizard dominance being for the Muggles' own good, this, I think, is the crucial point. Yes, we have been given power, and yes, that power gives us the right to rule. But it also gives us responsibilities over the ruled. We must stress this point. It will be the foundation stone upon which we build. Where we are opposed, as we surely will be, This must be the basis of all our counter-arguments. We seize control for the greater good. And from this, it follows that where we meet resistance, we must use only the force that is necessary, and no more. This was your mistake at Durmstrang, but I do not complain because if you had not been expelled, we would never have met. Albus.
By the end of the summer, fully aligned in their beliefs and ambitions, the two were ready to leave Godric's Hollow. They planned to embark on a journey in search of the three Deathly Hallows, and more importantly, to lay the groundwork for a global wizarding war, intending to force Muggles into subservience. Their shared goal was clear: to become the great leaders of the revolution, reshaping the magical world in their image. When Aberforth discovered this, he was furious. He saw Albus as a narcissistic egotist who, once again, had found a convenient justification to convince himself that abandoning his family was for their own good. The younger brother became aggressive, trying to persuade Albus to stay, not for him, but for Ariana, who desperately needed his protection. That night, the argument grew intense, and after another threat, it was Grindelwald who intervened. Aberforth drew his wand, but Gellert was quicker. The Cruciatus curse hit the younger brother, and he screamed, writhing in excruciating pain. Grindelwald couldn't help but laugh. "Foolish boy," he sneered as the pain echoed through the room. In that moment, Albus realized just how monstrous a person Gellert truly was. Overcome with horror, he stepped in to protect his younger brother, and a three-way duel erupted. In the chaos, Ariana rushed down the stairs to see what was happening, desperate to stop the fight, but she had no understanding of the danger she was walking into. A flash of light from a spell struck her. No one ever truly knew which of the three wands had cast it. Ariana's lifeless body crumpled to the ground, her eyes wide open, but empty, devoid of life. Ariana Dumbledore was dead. According to theories, Grindelwald quickly retreated to his great-aunt's cottage, where he had her create a portkey to take him back home. Meanwhile, Albus rushed to his sister's lifeless body, his heart heavy with guilt and despair. As he knelt beside her, he cried uncontrollably, knowing that nothing, not even his deepest regret, could ever undo the tragedy he'd caused. This was the definitive event that shattered the bond between the two young wizards forever and, more importantly, marked a point of no return for Albus Dumbledore, shaping him into the man we know today. It is interesting to recall the answer Albus himself, many years later as headmaster of Hogwarts, gave to young Harry Potter's innocent question before the magic of the Mirror of Erised.
Professor Dumbledore, can I ask you something?
Obviously, you've just done so.
Dumbledore smiled.
You may ask me one more thing, however.
What do you see when you look in the mirror?
I see myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks.
Harry stared.
One can never have enough socks,
said Dumbledore.
Another Christmas has come and gone, and I didn't get a single pair. People will insist on giving me books.
It was only when he was back in bed that it struck Harry that Dumbledore might not have been quite truthful. But then he thought, as he shoved Scabbers off his pillow, it had been quite a personal question. The truth is that the image Albus Dumbledore saw reflected in the mirror, despite the passage of time, kept a deep, unhealed wound open. His family alive, whole and happy. Percival and Kendra restored to him. Ariana alive and freely practicing magic. And Aberforth reconciled with him. After his sister's death and his separation from Grindelwald, Albus traveled to France, spending time in Paris, studying the ancient art of alchemy under Nicolas Flamel. Perhaps he sought both to give his brother space and to channel his grief into something productive rather than succumb to despair. It is unclear when he returned to Britain, but by then Albus had developed an intense interest in dragon's blood, ultimately discovering 12 new uses for it. This remarkable achievement earned him widespread recognition and paved the way for an offer to teach at Hogwarts. Deeply fond of the school and drawn to teaching since his youth, Albus gladly accepted. And so it was that the wizard returned to the castle, not to learn this time, but to teach. Burdened by the secret knowledge of Grindelwald's imminent rise to power and wanting to rectify past mistakes, it was natural, perhaps, that he felt drawn towards the job of defense against the dark arts instructor, a position in which he could most easily prepare his charges for the dangers he knew one day would come.
Excuse me?
Albus, who would henceforth come to be known to successive generations of students as Professor Dumbledore. (1926), a pivotal moment for the wizarding world, mirroring the growing tension and instability of Muggle Europe. Economic crises, social unrest, and the unsettling rise of increasingly authoritarian nationalist movements marked the continent's response to the devastating aftermath of the First World War, a tragedy from which Muggles were still struggling to recover. A grim, yet unsurprising scenario, at least not for Gellert Grindelwald, who had foreseen the danger posed by Muggles and their innate self-destructive tendencies years before. Albus Dumbledore, the young professor at Hogwarts, knew this all too well. But he also knew that the true threat to the wizarding world at that moment, greater than Muggle hatred and recklessness, was Grindelwald's unquenchable thirst for power. A desire that would stir and feed an ancient resentment in witches and wizards, inciting them to war and ultimately leading them to become not so different from the very Muggles they so despised. Thanks to the vast network of contacts and acquaintances Albus had cultivated over the years, a result of his growing reputation as the most talented and promising wizard of the century, he managed to track Grindelwald's movements and deeds, though it weighed heavily on his heart. The wound left by the loss of his sister, Ariana, was more open than ever, still bleeding with guilt. Facing the mere mention of Gellert Grindelwald's name meant confronting the unresolved nightmares of his past, his greatest pain. To face him meant confronting the chilling truth that haunted his every night's sleep. Was it Albus's wand that had ended Ariana's life? It was a question to which the wizard would never find an answer, a shadow that would follow him to his final days. One thing, however, was certain. If his sister were watching him now, she would be ashamed of him, just as his brother Aberforth was.
Albus.
Yet, as an exceptionally powerful and capable wizard, it was his responsibility to be prepared for the looming threat, despite the anguish, despite everything, for the good of the wizarding world, and the entire world, for the greater good. During those years, he had learned that Grindelwald's obsession with becoming the master of death by claiming all 3 Deathly Hallows had not diminished in the slightest.
I'm close.
Though his search for the Cloak of Invisibility and the Resurrection Stone had ended in failure, unsettling whispers suggested that the Dark Wizard had managed to seize what many considered the most powerful magical artifact ever conceived, the Elder Wand.
The Elder Wand.
According to the reconstruction of events Albus had pieced together, Mikiu Grigorovich, a renowned yet controversial wandmaker from Eastern Europe, whose reputation rivaled that of the Ollivanders, had spread word that he had come into possession of a wand of extraordinary power. Though the Elder Wand was dismissed by many as little more than a cautionary children's tale, it did not take Dumbledore long to suspect that perhaps, after centuries, the infamous Deathly Hallow had been found once more. The trail of the Elder Wand faded into the depths of medieval history.
The first well-documented mention of a wand made of elder that had particularly strong and dangerous powers was owned by Emmerich, commonly called the Evil, a short-lived but exceptionally aggressive wizard who terrorized the south of England in the early Middle Ages.
After being claimed by Emmerich the Evil, the Deathly Hallow passed into the hands of Egbert the Egregious, who managed to defeat the dark and terrible wizard, only to be defeated himself by Godelot. Known primarily for writing Magic Moster Evil, one of the most dangerous texts on the dark arts, he was eventually murdered by none other than his own son, Hereward. And with Hereward, all traces of the Elder Wand vanished, dissolving into superstition and legend, until
What's that?
Mikiu Grigorovich became its new master. but the wizard had proven to be decidedly short-sighted. Perhaps to boost the business and reputation of his workshop, perhaps, as some suggest, to find assistance to help him in his ambitious attempt to replicate the properties of the prodigious wand, or perhaps out of sheer, naive foolishness. The news spread as swiftly as dragonpox. And so it was that one night, a blonde-haired demon slipped into the shadows of his workshop, leaving Grigorovich unconscious on the ground and finally feeling, after so many years, the object of his long search, pulsing with vibrant power in the palm of his hand. Gellert Grindelwald had claimed the Elder Wand. Of that, Albus Dumbledore had no doubt. The revolution for the greater good, which would later be known as the Global Wizarding War, was now imminent. Despite Dumbledore's attempts to warn the wizarding world of the impending threat posed by Grindelwald, the British Ministry of Magic, led at the time by Hector Fawley, dismissed his concerns as unfounded alarmism. Unfortunately for all, it didn't take long for the Dark Wizard to catch the minister's attention. Through a series of devastating attacks across Europe, Grindelwald committed numerous mass murders, atrocities that even the Muggle world couldn't ignore, risking the exposure of magic and consequently, war. In a remarkably short time, the Dark Wizard had drawn the attention of magical authorities worldwide, becoming the most wanted criminal on the planet. The pressure from Aurors was enough to temporarily halt Grindelwald's revolution, forcing him to disappear, waiting for the waters to calm, waiting for his ultimate return.
Do not be fooled.
In the years that followed, Grindelwald's plans grew ever darker and more intricate. What we do know is that Dumbledore, convinced that the Dark Wizard's sudden disappearance was nothing but a temporary ruse, never found the courage to act directly and confront his former friend. Was Albus afraid of him? Possibly. Despite the disagreements among historians regarding many events, they all agree on one thing. While it is likely that Dumbledore feared facing Grindelwald because of their shared past, it is equally true that the only wizard Grindelwald ever feared was Albus Dumbledore. Both were wizards of exceptional skill, brilliance, and mastery. Both too powerful. Both bound by a past they could never fully set aside. For these reasons, it is said that Albus sought the help of one of his most gifted former students, Newt Scamander. By then, Newt had become a renowned magizoologist, working for the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures at the Ministry of Magic in London. His work had taken him across the globe, seeking out and rescuing magical creatures from the hands of his fellow wizards, whether from greedy poachers looking to profit from their rare qualities, or from those who viewed these beings as a threat to the statute of secrecy. His help proved crucial when, in New York, it was discovered that Grindelwald had been secretly infiltrating the upper ranks of the Magical Congress of the United States of America through human transfiguration. This deception led to the unleashing of an Obscurus, resulting in a disaster of unprecedented scale. Though the Dark Wizard was captured and imprisoned, he managed to escape just 6 months later, during the transfer orchestrated by British Aurors, who had arrived to escort him to Azkaban. The aftermath of Gellert Grindelwald's escape set off a chain of events that rippled from Paris to Berlin, shaking the established order and spreading his ideology with increasing fervor. Each day, more witches and wizards fell under his influence, captivated by his vision of a world where magical beings would no longer conceal themselves from Muggles, but instead rule over them.
The time has come.
By 1935, the Muggle world was approaching a point of no return. While the United States remained trapped in the throes of the Great Depression, Europe, still scarred by the devastation of the First World War just 17 years prior, was caught in a storm of rising tensions and radical political shifts. Nazi Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler since 1933, was solidifying its power, paving the way for the second great global conflict that would erupt just 4 years later. Such tension could not go unnoticed by the wizarding world, which began to see in Gellert Grindelwald a leader, extreme yet just, perhaps the only one capable of bringing peace and forging a new balance between the two worlds. The prophecy he had shared through his mastery of divination had shaken the very foundations of the magical community, stirring a wave of resentment toward Muggles not seen since the Dark Ages. Grindelwald's vision spoke of a weapon of mass destruction, so devastating that it would surpass even the darkest of magical curses. The Muggle world would come to know it as the atomic bomb. Such a future was never meant to come to pass. And so, the war finally erupted, transforming the wizarding world after centuries of fragile peace into a blood-stained battlefield, a relentless, unending genocide. Years went by. Just as Grindelwald had foreseen, the Second World War had erupted in the Muggle world, unleashing a wave of death and devastation unparalleled in the history of humanity. Despite Dumbledore's numerous attempts over the years to prevent the Dark Wizard's definitive rise to power, the British Ministry of Magic and the Auror Department never fully supported or trusted the Hogwarts professor's plans. Despite his proven abilities, there were growing suspicions that Dumbledore himself had been compromised long ago, secretly collaborating with Grindelwald to facilitate his ascent. Although this suspicion was never made public, the higher ranks of the ministry had become aware of the deep bond that had once tied the two wizards together. To their eyes, the anti-Muggle ideology of Dumbledore's father, Percival, who had spent his final years in Azkaban, only reinforced their doubts. However, things took a different turn in 1939. Fearing that the alliances of the wizarding world, particularly those in America, France, and Germany, were losing the war, the magical community found itself desperately seeking more decisive support. 12 years after the rally that marked Grindelwald's rise, the complacent British Minister for Magic, Hector Fawley, was ousted from his office for his failure to implement effective security measures in Great Britain. He was succeeded by the more proactive Leonard Spencer Moon, a capable and strategic leader amid the growing international crisis, who maintained direct contact with the Muggle Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, to ensure the highest level of protection for the country. It was an August day like any other, in those dark years of war, when Albus Dumbledore, no longer the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts, but a professor of Transfiguration, was informed by Headmaster Armando Dippet that the Ministry of Magic had identified an 11-year-old half-blood wizard, unaware of his heritage. As was customary, he needed to be assessed, informed, and guided in preparation for his imminent admission to the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The boy's name was Tom Riddle. And so Albus made his way to London, to Wool's Orphanage, where he would unexpectedly face one of the most pivotal encounters of his entire life. Despite Mrs. Cole's warnings about the boy's troubling behavior, the wizard remained skeptical. His intuition told him that before him stood a young wizard whose latent power was something exceptionally rare.
Who are you?
Despite learning of Tom's peculiar ability to speak Parseltongue, a rare gift typically associated with dark wizards, Albus did not immediately see it as a sign of danger. No, it was something else. Something in Tom's eyes. A gaze that pierced through the wizard's very core, betraying a natural instinct for cruelty, secrecy, and domination. It was a look that reminded Albus unsettlingly of the darkest side of someone he had once loved. What was the connection between young Tom Riddle and Gellert Grindelwald? That day, a disturbing feeling took hold of Albus Dumbledore. A feeling that, perhaps, never truly left him. As expected, the boy proved to be as talented as he was brilliant at Hogwarts. Perhaps the most gifted student since a young Albus Dumbledore. Though the Transfiguration professor had kept a close watch on the young Slytherin over the years, he couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of guilt about it. Beyond the walls of Hogwarts, past the mist-covered Scottish Highlands, the global wizarding world raged on, more ruthless than ever. What if his suspicions about Riddle were merely a reflection of his own failure? His inability, after all those years, to confront Grindelwald openly and put an end to it all. It was 1942, when Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry faced one of the darkest and most tragic moments in its history. The Chamber of Secrets had been opened.
Reliable historical sources tell us this much, but these honest facts have been obscured by the fanciful legend of the Chamber of Secrets. The story goes that Slytherin had built a hidden chamber in the castle, of which the other founders knew nothing. Slytherin, according to the legend, sealed the Chamber of Secrets so that none would be able to open it until his own true heir arrived at the school. The heir alone would be able to unseal the Chamber of Secrets, unleash the horror within, and use it to purge the school of all who were unworthy to study magic.
Many students, half-bloods and muggle-borns, were petrified by the piercing gaze of a basilisk, awakened from the depths of the chamber. Last among them was young Myrtle Warren, a Ravenclaw whose lifeless body was found in the girls' bathroom. If a basilisk had been summoned and controlled, only the heir of Salazar Slytherin could have achieved such a feat. And what if it had been Tom Riddle? Dumbledore couldn't shake the conviction, yet his evidence at the time was fragile, and the blood spilled within the castle seemed to him only a reflection of the horrors echoing beyond its walls, amidst the cries of war. Perhaps the heir of Slytherin, whoever they were, would have to wait. Perhaps it was time to face the inevitable. There was no turning back. Dumbledore understood that the time had come to face his destiny and confront the shadows of his past once and for all.
No more waiting.
What was the purpose of all those years spent mastering magic? The unmatched skill with a wand? If they could not summon the courage to confront his deepest fears, to save the entire wizarding world? The time for cowardice had finally run out, its last second ticking away into silence.
While I busied myself with the training of young wizards, Grindelwald was raising an army. They say he feared me, and perhaps he did, but less, I think, than I feared him. It was the truth I feared. You see, I never knew which of us, in that last horrific fight, had actually cast the curse that killed my sister. I think he knew it. I think he knew what frightened me. I delayed meeting him until finally it would have been too shameful to resist any longer. People were dying and he seemed unstoppable, and I had to do what I could.
And so, 1945 arrived. Against all odds, the Second World War in the Muggle world had finally reached its end, bringing a long-awaited peace that many had scarcely dared to hope for. Alongside it, the power of Gellert Grindelwald and the fervent support of the magical community began to wane, slowly but inevitably. The long-anticipated duel, the one remembered in every history book as perhaps the greatest magical duel ever fought, was about to begin. To this day, many details about where and how Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald, after so many years, finally faced each other, remain shrouded in mystery. What is known is that both of them fought with the full extent of their powers, unleashing a tapestry of spells of unmatched mastery and complexity. There is no definitive account of how the duel truly unfolded, yet over the years, historians have proposed a version of events that appears more credible than others, one that begins with a crucial question. As skilled and capable as he was, how could Albus Dumbledore have defeated a wizard of equal power who wielded the most formidable wand ever crafted in history? According to this theory, the Elder Wand does not automatically make its wielder the most powerful, but rather ensures that every spell cast is executed to perfection, at its fullest possible power. However, Dumbledore was already an exceptional wizard, capable of casting spells with flawless precision. His mastery of magic is evident in his use of the disillusionment charm, so potent that it rendered him completely invisible. In light of this, possessing the Elder Wand would not have given him any additional advantage. It becomes clear then that the legendary duel between Grindelwald and Dumbledore was less a test of sheer magical skill and more a battle of endurance. At this point, two decisive factors come into play, shaping the outcome of their confrontation. In those days, the fire of the Dumbledore house had risen anew in Fawkes the Phoenix. Loyal to his friend and master, the bird became an invaluable ally against the Dark Wizard, a force capable of countering the might of the Death Stick. With his healing tears, Fawkes could mend Albus's wounds and sustain his limited strength against the seemingly boundless power of the Elder Wand. But there's more. According to many scholars of magic, it is believed that the Elder Wand can only reach its fullest potential when the caster's intent is clear and resolute. In the case of offensive magic, much like an unforgivable curse, the intent must be lethal and merciless. But what if Grindelwald, after all, still harbored feelings for his greatest friend, the one with whom he had once shared dreams, ambitions, ideals, and love?
For the greater good.
Gellert Grindelwald fell, and his reign of terror came to an end. The global wizarding war, after more than 20 years, was truly over. The Dark Wizard was transferred to the magical authorities of Northern Europe, who, after a harsh trial for war crimes, sentenced Grindelwald to life imprisonment. His cell would be the highest and most isolated in Nurmengard, the fortress prison he himself had built amid the Austrian Alps to serve his war efforts, a place where he had once imprisoned all who dared to oppose him. The surviving acolytes were disbanded. Some faced trial and were properly convicted, while others vanished without a trace, never to be seen or heard from again. At the same time, having triumphed in the duel, Albus Dumbledore's fame was cemented worldwide. Minister Moon honored him with the prestigious Order of Merlin First Class, and he became universally regarded as the greatest wizard of modern times, a title and the weight of a tremendous responsibility towards the entire wizarding world. Albus understood this all too well by now. The mighty Elder Wand rested firmly in his grip, ready to obey its new master, or, as he saw it, its new guardian. For possessing the Death Stick meant safeguarding a power too great to be truly controlled, an artifact that, if it were to fall into the wrong hands, could once again shatter the delicate balance of the world. Perhaps, wherever she was now,
Albus.
his sister Ariana might finally forgive him.
Brother,
Perhaps.
thank you.
At Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Armando Dippett's tenure came to an end, and so Albus Dumbledore became the headmaster we all know, arguably the greatest the school had ever seen. Beyond the castle's towers, beyond the clouds, the sky seemed at last ready to clear. And yet, there was that feeling, that unsettling sense that refused to fade. The young Tom Riddle, who could say, perhaps one day, time would reveal the truth more clearly. For now, it was just worth enjoying a tasty sherbet lemon.
And here we are, my beloved wizards, witches, muggles, and squibs. We've seen how Albus Dumbledore walked his path through mistakes, victories, and a few little stumbles along the way. And if there's one thing I love about my job, it's that it doesn't matter if these stories belong to the wizarding world, to the muggle world, or to goblin folklore. No, what matters is that a good story will always be a good story with something to teach. And so here I am, telling stories for you here on the Spellbook Chronicles. And since stories, thankfully, never really end, I'll always be here, ready to fill you in with new, crackling, and marvelous episodes.